Welcome back to Unadvertised. I'm your host, Melina Lopez. Quick disclaimer: the information, opinions, and recommendations presented in this podcast are for entertainment purposes only. Any reliance on the information provided in this podcast is done at your own risk. This podcast should not be considered professional advice, and the content discussed will be sensitive topics such as sexual assault, self harm, violence, and mental illness. Listen with caution. For this episode, I decided I was going to tell my story, my truth. I'm hoping by sharing my experience, it will empower someone else or provide some sort of comfort in knowing that they aren't alone. I started working at a correctional facility in October of 2022, where I was hired as an office technician. An office technician is an entry-level position. I had applied to several departments and went through several months of interviews when I was finally offered a job. Before working at the correctional facility, I worked at a hospital that paid me very well. I knew I would be taking a massive pay cut, but to me it seemed worth it in the long run because eventually I wanted to become an officer. The office technician job I took was for making connections and to get my foot in the door. On my first day, I met Sophie, Sam, and Brenda. My new job was basically to assist Sophie with everything having to do with interviews, hiring, and clerical duties. I met Captain Johnson on my second day of working at the correctional facility. As we were having interviews that day, Sophie explained to me that Captain Johnson was going to be on the interview panel, which consisted of 3 people. Sophie told me that Captain Johnson was the best and he always bought them lunch. As Sophie went over to start setting things up, Sam came over to me and whispered that she thinks that Sophie and Johnson had some sort of romantic thing going on. I believed that they were seeing each other, but later I found out that Johnson was married and had kids. When I saw Captain Johnson, I was caught off guard because he was this big 6 foot, 300 to 400 pound guy, and I really wasn't expecting it. I watched him go over to Sophie as he acted really friendly and flirty. I just said hi and sat quietly the rest of the time. I didn't know how to address him, and I was new to the job. Sophie then told me that Captain Johnson was on the panel for interviews fairly often. She said usually once or twice a week, which made them very close. As the day went on, Captain Johnson became friendly towards me, and we began speaking more and more. At some point, I shared with him that I wanted to become an officer, which he immediately offered to help me and told me that I should put him down as a reference on my application because it just looked really good. I was surprised and extremely grateful. He then looked over all my documents to make sure that everything was filled out correctly. He was really supportive and very helpful. I was really nervous about applying, but he would always reassure me and tell me that I would be fine because he was helping me. He then told me that we would go out and get drinks to celebrate when I passed the test that I had to take. I laughed it off since I didn't really know how to respond. Captain Johnson didn't have my number and we hardly spoke. We only spoke at work. I was trying to keep it professional since I saw him as a friend and a mentor. Keep in mind, Captain Johnson was in his 50s and I was in my 20s. He told me he had a daughter around the same age, which made me more comfortable when I was speaking with him. On my 4th month of working at the facility, I took a day off to go take my test. He then gave me his number so that I could let him know how it went. Hours went by and I sent him a text telling him that I passed. He congratulated me and he told me that he knew I would pass. Then he asked me how the test went and that we had to celebrate. I ignored the comment and I finished the conversation. But the next day, when I returned to work, he congratulated me again and then brought it up again, the fact that we needed to celebrate. I felt like I owed him for helping me, so I agreed to dinner and drinks. After speaking with my best friend Leah, we thought it would be best to have her tag along so there would be no way of interpreting this get together as anything other than friendly coworkers. I then reached out to Captain Johnson to let him know that my best friend Leah would be joining us and that she was afraid of me becoming an officer and had a lot of questions about the job. After that, I told him that Leah was really pretty and around his age, so I made it pretty clear that he was not allowed to hit on her. He told me that he would be an overprotective brother if anything, so not to worry. The night of, I drove to Leah's house so that we would arrive to the bar/restaurant together. Once we got dropped off, we walked in, a bit taken back to see that Captain Johnson was not sitting alone at the table. Leah and I just looked at each other, confused, as we reached the table and sat down. Captain Johnson then introduced his friend Jim, who I had never met before, then let us know that his friend Jim also worked at the facility. Jim introduced himself and then began to tell us that his wife was out of town on a girls' trip in Vegas, but Captain Johnson was nice enough to invite him to dinner. At dinner, we spoke about the academy and what it was like working at the facility. Jim mentioned he had friends at the academy, so, quote, not to worry, if you're cool with us, then you'll be good, end quote. Of course, basically insinuating that they'll pass me. After that comment, we started talking about situations that have happened in the facility while working. He told us a story about him getting stabbed and then talked about his recovery. Soon after, the night took a turn. Jim made an inappropriate comment about how I would, quote, get with, end quote, Captain Johnson, and Leah would, quote, get with, end quote, Jim. Leah and I looked at Captain Johnson disgusted and upset because he was the one who brought him to dinner in the first place. Jim became more aggressive and continuously started to tell me to, quote, shut up, end quote, then say, quote, no one wants to hear from you, end quote. After that, Jim took an interest in Leah. He began to call her Pretty Eyes. The more Leah, Jim, and the captain drank after dinner, the more Jim became aggressive with me. And of course, Leah got upset with him and had to warn him that if he continued to speak to us like that, we would leave. Captain Johnson just continuously apologized for Jim's behavior. But the dinner came to a close at around 10 p.m. when Jim got upset with Leah to the point where she had to walk away in frustration. Jim called her a, quote, bitch, end quote, and that was just the last straw. I had one shot, one drink before dinner, one drink during dinner, and then I switched to water. I can't tell you how many drinks and shots they had that night because they ordered back-to-back rounds. Even though Leah and I asked to split the bill, Captain Johnson insisted on paying. As we walked out of the bar/restaurant, I began to order a ride back to Leah's house. Captain Johnson offered to take Leah and I to Leah's house. I asked Captain Johnson if he was okay to drive, and he just responded with, quote, I'm good, end quote. So I decided to cancel our ride, and I began to follow Captain Johnson to his car, which was parked right across the street from where we were. Once we were on our way to Leah's house, Jim and Leah began arguing back and forth, and it continued the entire time until we arrived to Leah's house. We got out of the car, and I thanked Captain Johnson, then apologized for Leah's behavior. As Captain Johnson drove off, I was left to deal with Leah. It took me about 10 minutes to get her inside the house. As soon as I made sure she was inside safely, I went and I sat down in my car, embarrassed and upset. I decided to text Captain Johnson and apologize. I explained how that wasn't the way I pictured the night going, and how I just wanted to relax and have a drink and pick his brain a little bit. He responded by inviting me to his house, which I knew was on the grounds of the facility we worked at. I told him that I didn't have my work ID, so they wouldn't let me go in. He then told me that he would wait for me before going in, and then told me to just follow him in his car. Once at the gates of the facility, he spoke with the officer who didn't even check my ID and just waved me in. I followed him to a house on grounds, parked my car, and then made my way to the front door. He invited me into what looked like an empty house. I asked Captain Johnson where Jim was. He told me that Jim was in the first bedroom on the right with the door open. But when I looked over, all I saw was a door open, but it was pitch black, so you couldn't see anything in the room. Honestly, I don't even know if there was someone in there or not. I followed Captain Johnson to his kitchen, which was right across from his front door. He then asked me if I wanted a drink. I answered yes, but then proceeded to take a look around the house since I had never been inside one of the homes at the facility before. As I was looking around, he poured something into my drink. Once he finished making the drink, he poured a shot separately as well and then asked me to cheers. I took the shot with him and then he handed me the drink that he made. We then walked over to the living room and sat on the couches across from each other. I took probably 2 sips of my drink before I asked if I could use his restroom. I went to use the bathroom, sat on the toilet, but then I started to feel a little bit off. It was just hitting me. And I walked back to the couch afterwards, drank another sip, which made me feel fuzzy. After that, I just remember flashes of the night. As I was talking to Captain Johnson, I remember thinking in my head, wait, this doesn't make sense. I remember thinking, okay, I'm not okay. So I told Captain Johnson I wasn't feeling well and that I was going to lie down on his couch, obviously the one that I was sitting on. Captain Johnson said, no, take the bed, which to me implied that either he was going to sleep on the couch or he was going to sleep in another room. I said, no, I'll sleep on the couch, and insisted. He told me, don't be silly. And then I followed him to the room, which was the first one on the left, right across from where Jim supposedly was sleeping. When I got into the room, I got into bed with my clothes on, and I immediately wrapped myself in the blanket like a burrito. I remember he was looking for something. I don't know what he was fussing around, but he was looking for something. And I heard him say, do you want to borrow some clothes? And I remember saying, no. And I said it very confused with a grossed out expression on my face. He then asked me, do you want to cuddle? And I yelled loudly, ew, no. After that, I think I fell asleep. All of a sudden, I just remember flashes throughout the next couple of hours. I remember coming to and opening my eyes to him performing oral sexual acts on me as I tried to push him off, but then realizing I couldn't move and I couldn't speak. I then remember another flash of memory is just waking up to pitch black, complete darkness, and I just felt this pressure on my chest. I couldn't move, and I felt like I couldn't breathe. Then another flash of memory, and I remember turning over and feeling him next to me in bed. At that time, I started to vaguely start coming to. I started regaining consciousness, and I had a rush of just fright and danger just take over my entire body. I jumped up as soon as I was able to, and I just kept repeating, I need to go. I need to go, over and over. I pulled my pants up that were around my ankles, put my shoes on, and ran to the car. I don't know how long I was sitting in the car when I decided to call the only person that I knew was up at that hour, my friend Mary. Mary is a friend who I went to high school with. I knew that she worked night shifts in a town nearby, so I guess I FaceTimed her. I don't remember much, but I remember feeling really thankful when she answered my phone call. I just told her something bad happened. I ruined my life. I ruined my career. Something bad happened. And just crying hysterically to her. I don't remember leaving the facility or driving or even most of my conversation with Mary. A whole chunk of time just was gone when I came to just in a car crash facing a freeway divider that I crashed into. I remember I called Mary. I didn't know where I was. I was in the middle of the freeway. I just crashed my car and I was hysterically crying. Mary instructed me to drive somewhere off the freeway, but to a safe location, and then send her my location and wait in the back seat of the car until she arrived. I don't remember fully how much time had passed when I came to again, to Mary opening my car door and told me that I needed to get into her car. Mary then put me in her car and said she was going to check out my car and see the damage. When Mary came back, she said, I don't know how, but you only popped your tires. She then looked at my phone and noticed that I had called the tow truck while I was sitting in the back seat waiting for her. I don't remember that either. I don't know how long I was in Mary's car when she said, do you want to get some food? I don't remember again how much time went by. I just came to again in a restaurant parking lot. Then again, a lost chunk of time. I came to again with Mary sitting in a booth, staring at food that I thought was disgusting at that time. It just looked so gross. I wasn't even hungry. Then again, chunk of time missing. I came to standing in my closet at my house. I guess Mary had driven me home. I remember putting on my PJs and getting into bed before passing out. The next day was the worst day of my life. My entire body was bruised and in pain. It hurt to sit. I couldn't get out of bed. I've been hungover before, but it never felt like this. Aside from my body, I was mentally shattered. a shell of a human being, honestly. I couldn't wrap my head around what happened. I tried to piece together the night myself, but I couldn't. I called Leah and Mary, and we figured out that I was drugged and raped by my mentor, a captain at my correctional facility. I was in shock, and I couldn't understand it. I spent the entire weekend in bed, not being able to move. Wasn't hungry, couldn't sleep. I just stared at the ceiling for hours, in shock. Monday came around. I went to work, going through the motions. I have no idea how I got to work. I wasn't okay, and my coworker saw that I wasn't okay. I was in shock all day, and visibly not okay. I just stared at my keyboard. She asked me to come outside with her, and I told her what happened. Unfortunately, I started crying, and it was just poor timing since the warden of the facility saw me crying, kept walking. He didn't stop, he didn't care enough to even ask if I was okay. My coworker then advised me to call Kaiser and get checked because he could have given me an STD. I didn't know who he had done this to, how many times he had done it. I went to my car and I reported it. I was told to stand by because a detective was going to call me. I was then instructed by the detective to go to Kaiser later that day at a certain time and put all my clothes in a paper bag. At the time, I was with my parents, and if I was missing for several hours, they would notice. I didn't tell my parents what happened. I couldn't talk, really, that whole weekend. So when I went home, I told my mom. She came with me to the emergency room where I was immediately escorted to wait for the detective in a private room. I gave my statement. I was given an exam. I was given 10 to 14 shots to prevent any kind of sexually transmitted disease. I was given many different kinds of medications. And then I was able to go home 6 hours later. After that, I just worked with the detective to get a confession and as much evidence as possible in order for her to close the case and bring my perpetrator to justice. In the meantime, I filed a restraining order because I didn't feel safe. Not safe in my home, my head, my body, not safe for my family, not safe with anyone. I didn't think Captain Johnson was capable of doing what he did. So I didn't know what else he was capable of. Once I got the response of the restraining order, I saw what I was up against, and I was pressured into dropping it. Who was I? Just a young girl who knew nothing, new job, and I was up against a captain who has spent 20 years working there. He was loved, he was trusted, and he had a lot of friends in very high places. I had to drop it. I dropped the restraining order. I didn't stand a chance. He had 17 character references from counselors, friends, officers, you name it. After that, I got a notification from the detective and just told me that he got arrested and made bail a few hours later. He didn't even sit that long in a jail cell. There were a lot of rumors going around trashing the girl who turned in the beloved captain. It was awful. There was articles from an anonymous girl who was sexually assaulted by a captain at a correctional facility. As the days went on, I had video visits for my mental health 3 times a day for 3 weeks straight, just to make sure that I wasn't suicidal. I didn't leave my house or my room, only to go to the bathroom, but that's it. I hardly spoke to anyone other than my parents and my sister, and I was broken. I applied for workers' compensation and was denied because I didn't work for the state for at least 6 months before it happened. I was only there for 4. My probationary period was extended because I missed so many days after my assault, so that also doesn't look great on me. I would try to come back to work and then leave for days on end and then try to come back. I heard that he was on administrative leave and then he would come back to work. When you're a victim of a crime, the state provides a list of nonprofits to help victims. Well, I called all those companies and I was put on a waiting list, but never heard back. I was then told by the district attorney that he wasn't going to press charges because it was a he said, she said situation. I later found out that he was up for re-election. He didn't want to take that chance with my case. Apparently, finding his DNA inside me, actually having him confess through text, and the witnesses who saw me before and after being drugged and raped was not enough. Once the district attorney made their decision, my correctional facility started their investigation, if that's what you want to call it. A special agent reached out to begin his investigation. He interviewed me, and I had all my documents with me. I brought it to the interview, and not once did he ask to see any of my documents. At the time, I didn't really think anything of it. But months later, after I reached out, because I never heard back, I reached out to many people, but I just kept getting passed on from person to person. Later on, I found out that the special agent who was investigating my case was actually very good friends with Captain Johnson. I thought I would try to file a harassment claim against Jim. I was told that it was sent out and that I would be notified and ask some questions, and then Leah was going to be notified and ask some questions. But I received notice that they decided that the matter would be referred to the warden for a review and decision. But of course, nothing happened. No follow up, no penalty, and no closure of what happened. The warden is friends with Captain Johnson, and he helped Jim in a lot of these situations. I saw no accountability for the facility or the state. I was informed that it wouldn't get him fired. I don't think that he deserves to wear a peace officer badge. I have been trying to keep my head down since I returned to work. I've been trying to promote and continue to pursue my correctional officer career, but I haven't been able to. I've heard things here and there. I heard that the drugs that were put in my drink were purchased from a trip to Mexico that a group of correctional officers took not too long before my assault because, quote, that's just what they do, end quote. I've been painted as the bad guy in the situation, even though I'm the victim. I didn't ask for any of this. I've heard a lot of whispers about how people think I'm lying, I'm doing it for attention, doing it for money, that I retracted my statement, that he's going to sue me for defamation. Honestly, I trusted someone who I thought was my mentor, a friend, a father-like figure, and someone I thought that was going to genuinely help me get the career that I've always wanted to be in. Instead, I was taken advantage of. I was violated, beaten, broken, and I had to learn to rebuild myself and stand up for myself. A few years later, and I'm still trying to do just that. I haven't gotten a single penny from the situation. I just can't wrap my head around the fact that not only did he get away with what he did legally, but he was able to keep his badge and, believe it or not, even got promoted to associate warden. I have the luxury of occasionally running into him at work because I refuse to quit. It may be my own fault, but he took everything from me. After he broke me, he took my safety, my confidence, my style, my damn hair color, because I just felt dirty. He stole who I was. I've struggled with depression and PTSD, stress, heartache. I've been ridiculed, bullied. But one thing I refused to let him take is my strength, my truth, and I'll be damned if he takes my future too. I won't give him that satisfaction. Thank you for tuning in to Unadvertised. If you or someone you know has experienced a similar situation, I encourage you to reach out for help. Remember, sharing your story can be a powerful step towards healing. If you enjoyed today's episode, please take a moment to leave us a review on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Podcast Index, Podcast Addict, Deezer, and Player FM. Your feedback helps us grow and bring you even better content. If you would like to reach out and submit your story, email unadvertisedinfo.crime@gmail.com. Don't forget to hit subscribe and never miss an episode. Until next time, stay safe, stay informed, and take care of each other. Always remember, you're not alone.